Alright, guys. What this is revisiting what I've been trying to share with you guys. I'm not sure how many people are exactly understanding what I mean. And so we're going to start a little. I'm just going to throw individual points out and see if you guys are catching it yet. And so this is hinged on Isaiah 46:10, which says that God declares the end from the beginning. Well, we know that the beginning, the first book of the Bible, Genesis, okay, actually means beginnings, right? Or the beginnings. And in Genesis, there's 50 books. I accidentally said books, 50 books. There are actually 50 chapters in Genesis. Chapters, not books. There's 50 books. Now, what 50 is a Jubilee cycle. So a Jubilee cycle is like 50 days. But in the Bible, there's these patterns where God would extrapolate days into years. And even into 1,000 years sometimes, because in 2 Peter 3:8 it says that a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord. So these numbers are extrapolated. And when we look in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, we see that there are 120 jubilees, 120 50-year cycles, okay? And that's what that means when he says that my spirit shall not contend with man forever, for his years shall be 120. And that happened at the fall, because when Adam became a fallen creature, now God's spirit was contending with man. Before, God's spirit was not contending with Adam or Eve. But when the fall came, now there's a contention, a fight, a struggle. And so what this is, 120 years is Jubilees. And we know that people lived after the flood, hundreds of years. So it can't mean that man will only reach 120 years old. However, after you look at the Jubilees, 50 times 120, because of the prophecy, 120 Jubilees, and it equals 6,000 years. We're at that tipping point right now. We're just about there. And, people's age really doesn't go past 120. So it can have a dual meaning. It could mean age of people, and 6,000 years. And they kind of converge. You see, they converge together. So when that 6,000 years is up, then the age is not going past 120. As time goes on, it gets funneled down. The age is funneled down to fit this 6,000 year period. So that's a very good possibility also. That's how the Bible is. There's dual meanings. There's higher and lower meanings, I guess you could say. I'm not sure higher or lower. It's just, like I said, years sometimes are days. Sometimes he turns a year into 1,000 years. Just like the 6 days of creation. 6 days of creation, we see there that God is also declaring the end from the beginning. Because the 6 days of creation is spoke about in Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, the beginnings. That's what Genesis means. And he's showing us that the 6 days are 6,000 years, according to 2 Peter 3:8. A day is like a 1,000 years with the Lord. And so we have 6,000 years there again shown to us. You see, so he's declaring the end from the beginning. And that's Isaiah 46:10. And then the seventh day, of course, is the day of rest. The Sabbath or sabbatical. Seventh day is rest. Which is, in the higher meaning, I guess you could say, the millennium. The 1,000 years of Christ on earth. 1,000 years. You see that? So days into 1,000 years. Not just days into years, but days into 1,000 years. 6 days is 6,000 years. The seventh day is 1,000 years. And then you have the eighth day. The eighth day representing the number 8, showing us infinity, or in other words, time not stopping. No more time, just continuous which in the Bible is after the great white throne judgment, where all unsaved people are thrown into the lake of fire according to the book of life, whether their names are in there or not. Now, the other mysteries that came later on, which were revealed to me, those first mysteries, me and my friend Jerry, we leaned on each other and it was back and forth. We were both being revealed things. And my friend Rodney, I don't want to leave you out. Rodney, of course, you always help too. But the other mysteries is having to do with our years, the years that we are in that have passed, that are coming. They are coinciding with chapters in the Bible and events. So, for instance, in 2025, if you look in, if you look in Romans 11:25, notice the 25, right? You have the fullness of the Gentiles, right? Which in my opinion is the rapture. And that's 2025. You see the connection there. But not only that, there's other verses that are coinciding with 2025 that show like a great deliverance or a rapture. Because if you then break it down, which God showed me this, 20 plus 25, we get a 45, right? See how we added that, 20 plus 25? Well, if you look in Genesis, again, going to the beginning, Genesis chapter 45, you have a great deliverance. Great deliverance, symbolic of a rapture. And when they were delivered, all the tribes, then they went up to Canaan, which was the land of milk and honey, symbolic of heaven. Symbolic of heaven, okay? And that's what the Old Testament is doing. It's showing you physical examples of spiritual things. In other words, on earth as it is in heaven. When you look in the Old Testament, you see a lot of symbolic things on earth that translate into heavenly spiritual truths also. So just like in Genesis chapter 45, there was a great deliverance where they went to Canaan, which was considered the land of milk and honey. Well, in 2025, we go to our land of milk and honey, which is heaven. You see, it's a type and a shadow of the true meaning in heaven. That's what this earth is. That's what God is showing us through these stories. Okay, and Genesis chapter 45, we're into the story of Joseph and his brothers, which is a total type and shadow of Jesus Christ and what happened to him, how his brethren sold him off, and then he came back. They didn't recognize him like the unbelieving Jews when he comes back until he reveals himself to them, and they actually see him. And there's so much more types and shadows in that story of Joseph and Pharaoh's 2 7-year dreams. Pharaoh's 14-year dream. But this is a pattern that I'm seeing, how our years are coinciding with events and verses. So in other words, if you go to Romans chapter 11, verse 29, okay, we went from 25, the fullness of the Gentiles, all of a sudden, in verse 26, we're dealing with unbelieving Jews. So there's the rapture, and then we go to 26 to 29, and what is, in verse 29, God is giving out gifts. Well, what year is that? That's 2029. 2029, you see the connection here? 2029. 2029 is when Christ returns. And 2029 is when John Connor and the Terminator comes back with the resistance and defeats the AI. But it's all symbolic. They show us these truths in movies, predictive programming. And so we have a connection there with our year that we're in and with the verse in the 11th chapter of Romans, that the events are coinciding with the years and verses. And in Romans chapter 11, look at the 11. We are in the 11th Shemitah right now. This is all happening under the 11th Shemitah, which is a 7-year cycle, We are the 11th 7-year cycle from when Israel became its own kingdom again in 1948, 1949. We are in the 11th Shemitah. And now we have these verses coinciding with the years that we're in and the events that are going to take place and have taken place. Then when you go to, it's all connected even to Genesis. This is all connected to Genesis. That's how God declares the end from the beginning. Because when you go to Genesis chapter 49, see, not 29 anymore, but 49. But 49 is a 2029 also. Chapter 49 of Genesis is also a 2029 because, again, remember, add 20 plus 29 is 49. See all these connections, how it's all connecting with the years? And in Genesis chapter 49, what happens? They're all gathered together and given their gifts. Gathered and gifts. Just like Romans 11:29, Genesis chapter 49. And they're both connected to 2029. Because 20 plus 29 is 49. And if you just take the last two on 29, you got Romans 11:29. I'm sure that this is all throughout the Bible, especially in the book of Genesis, because of Isaiah 46:10. God declares the end from the beginning. I'm sure there are so this is like the Bible is, it's all connected. It's all connected, everything, but it's all divided at the same time. Just like eternity. Eternity is all connected with the past, present, and future. That's what the Bible is. But yet there's also divisions. But it's connected even within the divisions. Just like God himself, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, they're all one. But yet they're all divided. But they're all one even when they're divided. This is what I've been trying to show you guys on my last video. It's all connected. And again, one last thing. In the book of Romans, we have all these connections with the future, 2025, 29, then you get to 30, all that. Right after the rapture in 25, verse 25, chapter 11, which is the fullness of the Gentiles. Then we have verse 26, where God immediately starts dealing with the unbelieving Jews, and it goes all the way down to 29. You guys, the rapture's in 2025. Now, one more pattern that I'm going to show you guys. It's Revelation chapter 12, verse 13. 12 plus 13 is 25. We're going to see how it is Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Revelation chapter 12, verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. That is Romans 11:25. When the fullness of the Gentiles come in, and the verse 25, then verse 26 starts dealing with the unbelieving Jew, persecuting the Jews that are left. And this is all connected, as I've said before, to 2025. 25, 25, 25. The devil is cast out. The fullness of the Gentile comes in. There's a great deliverance. Just like Genesis chapter 45, there is a great deliverance for all the tribes. Genesis 45 is 20 plus 25. You have 45. Genesis 45. All connected. And when you go up in these verses and down in these verses, like in Revelation and in Romans, and the years that we are in, they're all matching up, coinciding with events. Like I said, the Bible is all one, but it's all divided. But it's all one at the same time.
Proverbs chapter 25, verse 2, the King James Bible. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. God bless.